Story 1. Growing up, I always wanted to go on a bike ride at night. Something about it seemed really cool to me. It wasn't until I was 13 that my mom finally let me. She told me to wear my helmet, have my phone, take a flashlight, and she set the parameters for where I was allowed to go. She gave me about 4 miles, which was a lot to me, so right after the sun set, I was off. I loved it. There were no people out walking their dogs, no kids running around. The temperature was perfect, etc. It was really fun, so fun that I ignored the limits my mom set. You see, where I was biking was all walking paths. It was one of those grassy areas between 2 neighborhoods. There's this long path that went at least 600 feet at a 25-degree angle. I was flying down this hill having an absolute blast and darted right through the parameters. My mom set these limits for a reason. Everything on the inside was close to houses and people. The outside, more specifically, the place where the path I was on led to, was barren. I rode along this path for 10 minutes before I could only see some of the lights of the houses on the inside of the limits. After 15 minutes of riding along this dirt path, I hear singing. It sounded about 30-40 feet in front of me. I stopped riding to hear it better. It was a woman's voice. She was singing Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. But she wasn't singing the words, just the melody of the vocals. Her voice was strange. You know how when you have phlegm in your throat, your voice gets scratchy? That's what her voice sounded like. I inch forward to try and see her. I get close enough to see the silhouette of hair bouncing up and down like she was headbanging. I decide to get my flashlight out. I'm thinking that maybe this person is in need of help or something. Or maybe this is an insane person, and the light will scare them away. So I take the flashlight out of my pocket, point it at her, and turn it on. The moment the light hit her, she stopped moving completely. She was facing away from me. She had disgusting hair that seemed to be sticking together in clumps. Some of her hair was ripped off too. She was wearing a very oversized, bright red hoodie. I was almost too scared to move. I think she was too. I conjured up as much bravery as I could and said sorry. In a very, oops, this is the wrong room kind of way, she didn't respond. I turned off the flashlight and put it back in my pocket. Just as I was turning my bike around, she screams. She screams in an awful, awful high-pitched voice. I damn near shit myself as I throw myself back onto my bike. I hear her voice getting closer to me. I book it as fast as I can. I don't look behind me, and I don't stop pedaling. Her screaming grew quieter and quieter until it dissolved into the howling of the wind. Story 2. In Toronto, there is a subway system run by the TTC, or Toronto Transit Commission. They often square off certain parts of the subway route, which is pretty fucking basic, in order to do some upgrades or fix bits. Lately, they've been shutting down the subway rides into downtown on the weekends. Anyway, they were doing some upgrades on the track, and we were going by pretty slow, making sure not to run over anyone while they scampered out of the way. Out of nowhere, the power cut out. Now, I should say that I wasn't the only one in the train car. The cars are decently long, and I was at one end, and some woman was at the other end. When I walked onto the train, it was up at her end where there was a giant bubble of seats empty around her. She was displaying the typical signs of batshit crazy, and people sort of avoided her. Everyone else was off, getting off at Yonge, but I still had another couple stops east to go. She was laughing, audibly, and I tried to tune it out by listening to some music, but it never really worked. It was so chilling that my brain sort of just kept ignoring the music and focusing on her. So eventually I just unplugged the music and sat back, trying not to shit my pants. So anyway, the power cuts out, and here I am sitting at one end, as far away from her as I could possibly be, and the lights turn off for some reason. She stopped laughing. In fact, she stopped making any noise at all. When the lights came back on about 5 seconds later, when I had sufficiently shit my pants, she wasn't at the far end. She was about 3 seats away from me, staring at me. The second the train stopped, I bolted for the fucking door. After she located, she didn't make another sound. She just kept staring. Fucking creepiest moment of my goddamn life. Story 3. I was working the night shift at a hospital on a med-surg floor. We had gotten a young man, late 20s, psyche patient who needed medical care. He was paralyzed from the mid-chest down, but had a tracheotomy tube and could breathe on his own. I remember that it was difficult to distinguish his irises from his pupils, and it just looked like he had very creepy black eyes. He also didn't talk due to his track tube, but was able to giggle maniacally every now and then. One night, I had turned the patient on his right side facing the wall away from the door to his room. We kept a light on over the sink in his room so we could see when we had to work with him. I had stopped at his door, which opened into his room, and looked at him, mentally noting that he appeared to be sleeping, or at least quiet since I could not see his face. I was facing the door and making some notes on a form clipped there. I heard no noise, but suddenly the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I felt like I was being watched. With my hand still in midair above the form, I slowly turned my head and looked towards the patient. As I did, I saw that his head was slowly turning to look at me over his left shoulder. The angle and degree of the turn was abnormal. I just kept staring as he looked at me and then grinned. Fucking evil. I was never so creeped out in my life and could hardly breathe. I stood there frozen for a few seconds, never took my eyes off him, and just slowly backed out of the room. I can't even tell you what I did after that or what happened to him, but the memory of that moment has never faded. Story 4. I once lived in a sort of bad neighborhood in a very tiny house with my brother, who was rarely there. Old house, so it was a little creepy, and also felt like anyone who wanted to could have broken in. One night I was getting ready for bed. It was pretty late and during a hot summer. We didn't have AC, so I had one of those 2-fan window deals. The blinds were pulled down to the top of the fan. I was changing for bed. I sleep in underwear and a t-shirt. I slipped out of my pants and changed my shirt. I don't wear a bra to bed because fuck that. I'm about to hop into bed when I hear a low masculine voice say, "Let's see those titties again." I think my whole body stopped working for 5 seconds while I absorbed the fact that there was a creepy peeping Tom right outside my window, and I was alone in a house that he could get into if he wanted. It was the first and only time I called the 911. I had a panic attack waiting for the police, and the very nice 911 lady had to calm me down. Bright note? Apparently, it was a slow night because they sent 3 cars. I was so happy when I moved. Story 5. So it's 3 a.m., and I'm in my living room studying for an exam the next day. My dog is tied up outside. Suddenly, she starts going bonkers, barking and snarling into the night. I call out the open window for her to hush, which she usually does on command, but she keeps it up. When I see her, I see that she is visibly freaked out, so, assuming there's another dog roaming the neighborhood, I was in a duplex in a woodsy suburban area, so that wasn't abnormal. I step out onto the porch to pet her and calm her down. She barely seems to notice me and keeps barking, hackles up, shaking and slobbering all over the place. Then I hear a pleasant voice call out from the street, "Hey, sorry to make your dog start barking. I was just walking home. Since this was a college town, this was also not abnormal. Mind if I pet her? Maybe if I meet her, she'll calm down." Since I compulsively pet other people's dogs, this doesn't seem unreasonable. Yeah, dumb, I know, but I have a big, scary-looking, and now apparently acting, dog, so I'm fearless to a fault. I'm expecting to see some college dudes come strolling out of the darkness, but instead it's a somewhat scraggly townie. Late 20s, shoulder-length hair, sweatshirt, jeans. Okay. My dog starts going really crazy as he steps into the light of the porch, so he stops at the base of the steps. He starts talking about a German Shepherd he'd had, see pictures, I think she's a GSD mix, and talking sweetly to my dog. Then he looks at me with this glazed look and says, "I'm gonna go home and lick my lips like a dog, because a 230 Lobus horse sprinted at me today." So that's when I realized that it's 3 a.m. I'm basically restraining my dog from tearing this dude apart, and he's apparently nuts. A few uncomfortable seconds go by until I say, "Well, that sounds like quite an experience. I think I'll take her inside. It's late." At this point, he looks concerned and a little hurt and says, "Is everything okay?" I say, "Yep, nice to meet you," and drag my dog inside, locking the door. Come to find out, that guy was a former friend of my cousin's, who are about 10-15 years older than me, who took a lot of psychedelic drugs over the course of a couple of months, and then just didn't come back one day. He goes back and forth between being a normal, relatively shy guy to claiming to predict world events based on the activities of animals, saying generally bizarre things like what he said to me, and sometimes acting like an animal himself. I saw him all the time after that. Story 6. I recently went to the hospital to get checked for mono. I was the only one sitting in the waiting room, and I sat there for nearly a half an hour when a person, not sure of its gender, walked past. It was really weird looking. Pink mohawk, raggy, old clothes, wide eyes, and the way it walked shot instant chills down my back. Its legs stayed straight as a pin. They never bent. Its body also stayed straight, and its eyes, baggy eyes that had a vacant look in them, eyes that stayed aimed at the ceiling as the thing moved past the waiting room. That kind of creeped me out, but I didn't think much of it. I mean, I was safe. There were lots of doctors and nurses around, right? About 15 minutes passed, and the nurse called me into a room across from the entrance to the hospital. I sat on the bed, which was right in front of the door to the room, which was left open. As I was waiting for my doctor to come, I saw it again. It was walking the same zombie-like way. It shuffled up to the entrance doors and just stared out them. Then the intercom recited the words, "Code yellow at main entrance" 3 times, then 2 nurses appeared and took him back, down the hallway, out of sight. I thought that was a little odd, but still, I wasn't too scared. Until it happened again. It walked back to the main entrance, but this time, it didn't look out at the glass door. It was staring into my room. At me, to be exact. I will never forget the haunted look in its eyes. It just stared at me, and all I could do was stare back. After what seemed like an eternity, it tilted its head to the right, and holy butt fucking shit, it was walking towards me. I panicked on the inside, but my body wouldn't move. You have no fucking idea how much I wanted to spring up and slam the door shut. But I couldn't. I was paralyzed, stuck on the bed. I didn't know what the hell was going to happen. I just sat there and waited as the zombie thing dragged its feet and got closer to me, anger flashing through its eyes. It almost reached my door when a nurse grabbed its arm and said, "You silly, that's not your room," and pulled it away. But as it was being dragged down the hallway, it wouldn't lose my gaze. And all the while it was moving out of my sight, there was hate, anger, and rage in its eyes. That fucker wanted me dead. For what reason, I have yet to find out. Story 7. I was in work the other day and had to get a butler's tray from the kitchens, but it was about 7 p.m., and the kitchens were long closed, weren't needed because we were hosting a drinks reception on the top floor. So there's me, walking around the dark as fuck kitchens acting all brave. I'm not scared of the dark, just what I can't see. And I come to the first door, the first of 3 to get to the store, and I still don't remember where the light switches are, but I go through anyway. I know there's no one there because I would have heard them. My route was blocked by a huge mixer that had not been moved back to its place and was too heavy for me to move, so I went around the other side of the counters and head to the door. When I get there, I shit myself because I see my reflection in the porthole type window. Then I realize what it is, regain any composure, and head into the storage room and find the light right next to the door. I turn it on, grab the tray and leave it on because I know I'll need to come back later to put the tray back. On my way out, I realize there's no window in the porthole at all. This is the most scared I've ever been, ever. Yesterday, however, I was talking to the chefs about a musical festival we'd all gone to a few weeks back and told them about the freaky reflection in the non-existent window. Apparently, it happens to people all the time who go in there when it's dark, but no one could explain what it was. Story 8. There was a building in my town that used to be a Tesco. It was completely emptied and abandoned, ready to be demolished, but it was seriously huge. Me and my friends normally go drinking in the alleyways in my town, but we decided one night to try and break in just to chill. It was easy enough to pry open the fire exit and get inside. We used our phones for light. We checked all the rooms upstairs, and then we walked down in the huge empty area. That was the main shop floor. In the middle of the darkness, the whole building was pitch black. Was this circle of light on the floor, coming from the skylight? It was nighttime, so the moonlight was coming through, and we decided to sit in the circle to drink and chat. Now all 360 degrees around us was complete darkness. You couldn't see a thing, except for what was in the circle of light. This was very unsettling on its own, as darkness is scary enough as it is, especially in an abandoned building, but even worse when you are surrounded 360 degrees by it. We carried on drinking, then we heard a noise from the darkness. We thought it was our friend, who we texted letting him know where we were, and to go through the fire exit at the back, so we shouted, "We're over here, man," and waved towards the direction of the door. We saw a shape standing at the door, which was quite far away, but you could make out the silhouette of the person. This shape didn't respond. It closed the door behind it, and we heard total silence. We started to say the usual "stop fucking around" stuff and "we know you're there," etc. I was beginning to become slightly concerned, as we were saying the exact same lines uttered by the soon-to-be deceased in most horror movies. Then, we just heard moving around and scuttling around in the darkness. We all stood up with our bottles in hand, trying to give it the whole tough guy thing, especially since our friend texted us saying he wasn't there yet. Then we just hear running, sprinting, the footsteps echoing louder and louder, and a full-on charge coming right towards us. This was one of the most fucking terrifying things I have ever experienced. We have a lot of crazy junkies in our town, so we were expecting some crazy, doped-up psycho, armed with knives or used needles coming at us. Next thing, a fully uniformed officer leaps into our circle of light and screams. We all shit ourselves, bottles raised above our heads ready to fight back, something he never even flinched at. He then begins to laugh, not just a chuckle, but uncontrollable laughter. The other officer we then see opening the door from the inside. He obviously waited by the door to enjoy the show, laughing hysterically also. The officer who jumped at us keeps trying to talk, but is interrupting himself with his own hysterical laughter. Eventually, he manages to muster up, "You know you shouldn't be in here, now head on out," before the big bad boogeyman gets you. It turns out they seen us on CCTV breaking into the building and came down to kick us out. We walked away, shaking, embarrassed and pissed off, especially since while the officers were walking away, we could hear them still laughing and saying things like, "Did you see their faces?" I look back on it now and laugh, but I seriously shit my pants. Story 9. I lived in a rather rural area, but on the road that takes you to the gas station and Walmart. It's just gotten dark and I'm pulling into my yard after getting gas. Walking on the road is a man with a bag and young girl. It seemed odd, and since there are no sidewalks, it's not safe to walk on the road. They came a direction where there isn't a store for 10 miles, and the direction they were headed didn't have a store for another 3. I'm still in my car, but in front of my house. I think about going in and telling my parents, but I just go over and ask if they are okay. I ask if they had a car breakdown. The man says no. He doesn't take the opportunity to elaborate. The whole thing is weird, and I'm the cautious type. It was summer and the man was slender in run-of-the-mill clothes that don't conceal a whole lot, like a gun or hammer to blindside me with. Yes, this was actually my thinking at the time, and he had a kid with him. So tip to you serial killers out there, even otherwise cautious people might let you into their car if you have a quiet child with you. Yes, this possibility was also actually my thinking at the time. I ask where they're headed and he says, "Just up the road a bit." How informative. The girl gets in the back seat and the man sits up front with me. I forget the name he used, but he then says to the girl, "Stacy, I mean Amber. Isn't it nice this girl is giving us a ride?" He got the girl's name wrong. This whole time I've been trying to judge her demeanor to see if she feels safe and if this is her father, so that didn't help. It's fully dark now, and he tells me to take the turn away from the gas station and street lights. At this point I'm thinking, well, joke's on him, because if he tries anything, I'll floor it into a tree his side first, and I will not hesitate to eye gouge a bitch. We are coming up on an abandoned restaurant now, and he tells me I can let them off in the parking lot. He still hasn't told me anything about them. So I asked, "Do you live around here?" hoping he'll point to a house or something. He just say, "Yup," and I let them out. They thank me and go on my way. In retrospect, it's pretty funny because I'm sure he thought nothing of it, but I spent the entire ride contemplating every paranoid violent possibility. I've never seen them again. Story 10. During college, I was living in a house with a few roommates. Late one night, me and one other guy who lived there were up late watching TV. Around 3, we call it a night, and he goes down into the basement to his room, and I go upstairs to mine. As I'm getting ready for bed, he busts into my room in a near panic saying someone was in his room taking the posters off the walls. I don't know what to think and walk out to the living room with him just in time to see a semi-homeless looking guy in his 30s coming up the stairs. I demand to know what he's doing there, but he keeps saying, "I didn't take anything, want to search me," and opening up his coat. I assured him we didn't want to search him and asked him to leave in a more and more demanding until he finally agreed. Later that year, a girl who lived there with us was by herself and hears a knock on the door late at night. Expecting the guy she was dating at the time, she just opens the door and there's a strange-looking guy standing there who matches the description of the previous poster guy. but she wasn't there for that event, so we'll never know. The guy tells her he used to live there and wants to look around the house at like 2 a.m. She says no and starts to close the door. He lunges for it and she slams it just in time. Needless to say, she didn't answer the door late at night after that.